The intensity continues to ramp on up as we get closer and closer to the cutoff for the playoffs in Season 2 of NASMARB. Welcome to the qualifying session for the Malbao 400. This is Rick O'Shea. Glad to have you here for what will be a very interesting race and a very interesting qualifying session. We've seen some interesting qualifying sessions as of late, including last week when speed just simply wasn't there for a lot of drivers. And now, as you get closer and closer, those drivers that are close to the cutoff line, as you see the qualifying order coming across your screen right now, really don't have the opportunity to afford not making a race or potentially having that low qualifying seed. So this is a very important qualifying session, and it begins with the driver that qualified last week. That was the 17 of Prime for Crimson Cruisers Racing. Finished 11th in this race a season ago. Does have a win here, of course, at Spiral Speedway. That came way back in the first ever NASMARB race, but it has been struggles really ever since then, including last week in qualifying at DDT International when Prime failed to finish either lap. Let's see if they can get through a lap here at Spiral Speedway. And they will finish the lap, but again, speed didn't really seem to be there. That's a 5-second lap. 5:03 time for Prime. And certainly a very disappointing start. The track record, by the way, is almost a full 2 seconds faster than that. Winx had the track record with a 3.10. That came way back in the first qualifying session in NASMARB history. This race last season, the pole was won by Electro, who had a 3.5 average finish. As you see Nugget on the screen, getting ready to go. Finished 10th in this race last season, trying to just make the race. Having qualified for 2 of the first 6 races this season, certainly very disappointing. And this looks like a better lap, certainly, than what Prime just ran, and nearly a full second faster, a 4:09 on the inside line for the 99 of Nugget. Now here is Steve, who won the pole last week, but finished dead last. As you see, the 32, 5 fastest laps. They have failed to qualify for a race, couple of finals appearances, no victories yet, 16 heat wins on the season, but it's been a very up and down season. The ups, for the most part, have been during qualifying, and a lot of times those downs have been in the actual race events. Let's see what Steve can do here. Wow, that was a lot of speed through that first turn and on to turn number 2, and it's the fastest lap so far by 1/100th of a second. It's a 4:08 for the 32. So while that time is fastest, not sure that's exactly what Steve was looking for. As we'll have a look now at Sal on the number 1, and Sal in this points battle, really trying to pick up the speed here in the final 2 regular season races. Spiral Speedway has been home to some very fast-paced action in the past. Sal looking to see if that's the same here for this first qualifying lap. Number 1 goes from the inside line here, hard into the wall immediately. Not a good start by any stretch. Still banging up against the wall and coming across the line with the slowest time thus far. 5.13 is what they'll call it officially. And a very disappointing lap there for Sal, and that was doomed from the very beginning. I mean, there was nothing good about that lap from the very start. And now Electro, who won this race last season, for OB Racing in the 93, it's Malbao on the hood today. The presenting sponsor of the race is also on the hood of the 93 for the second time. A victory here, 12 heat wins here. On the other side, Electro for this season has done pretty well, but still would love to do a little bit better, trying to get a victory maybe today at a racetrack they've succeeded at, but the speed simply is not there right now. Looks like there might be something going on with the back end of that car. That's a 4.96. It is 3rd out of the 5 to run right now, but a pretty significant drop-off from the first 2 to the last 3. Not a good lap by any stretch for Electro. And now here comes Piper in her first ever attempt at this specific race. Of course, she ran here earlier in the season. In the 53, driving for Marbleau Yellow. Piper with a finals appearance, a 3rd place finish. Came way back in the season opener at Spiral Speedway. Finished third, qualified sixth. She's got good numbers this year, 21 heat wins. She's only made one finals, though, and has yet to win her first career race, and she's got a pretty good lap going here. Kept it pretty straight, and that is going to be third fastest, a 4.34 for Piper. And it just appears as though these cars haven't had quite as much speed this season as maybe we've seen in the past. Talked about it. This specific race, the pole sitter ran a 3.5 as the average time. And then, of course, if you look at the track record, that was a 3.1. We've had only one driver, or two drivers, beg your pardon, come within a full second of that time right now as you get ready for Confetti, who has really struggled this season, has not done particularly well at this racetrack either. And so Confetti in a little bit of a tough spot. Did finish fifth in this race last season, though, and now a big spin here, it looked like. Maybe not a spin, maybe just really sideways. Very slow coming down the backstretch, and this will be the second slowest time of the day. 5.10 for the number 7. Yeah, Confetti just way out of control there, all over the place. And that will certainly not work out, as here is the 25 of Spitzer, who made this race and then finished dead last in this race last season. We're about to get into a trio of drivers that didn't do very well in this particular event last season. And that starts with Spitzer, who has one finals appearance, 9 heat wins only this season, a couple of fastest laps, but it hasn't qualified or hasn't translated into a whole lot of success. Spitzer is right on the playoff cut line, 1 point behind Woodpecker, needs a good lap here, and they're not going to get it. Looked pretty slow there. It is the slowest time of the day. Well, that's certainly a very disappointing start to the day and to this final push in the last couple of weeks of the season, as Spitzer puts up a 5.34, slowest time so far. And from the driver that finished 18th in this race last season to the driver that finished 17th in this race, that is Jack Tato, who has had a lot more success this year. Of course, picked up a win, has been in a couple of finals. Pretty good qualifying. 1 DNQ did throw in there. Average finish right around 10th. 20 heat wins for Jack Tato. Hoping that the success that they've had this season can translate into some more success here at this particular racetrack. And that has not happened so far, but look at this speed. Looks pretty good for Jack Tato. Nice lap. And it is the fastest time of the day. And the first sub-4 second time. A 3.92. And to the top of the board goes the 12. And I'll tell you what, the 12 and the 32, who right now run the fastest times, have been really impressive in qualifying particularly. As we move now to Streamer, who had a shocking DNQ in this race. Has not done very well here at Spiral Speedway, and has had a little bit of a disappointing season here after really a lot of success last season. The best driver last season hasn't even made a finals appearance. They've got Malbow on the hood for the first time ever, and let's see what Streamer can do here. Looks like a solid lap, not anything to write home about. Well, actually, it's pretty good. A 4.03 is the second fastest time so far. So that's not so bad at all. And now here's the 43 of Woodpecker, who is also in need of another good week. Going head-to-head against Spitzer for that final playoff spot right now. Woodpecker has had some success, but also some struggles here this season, trying to get in maybe on points. They were able to get in via a victory at the very end of the regular season last season, trying to get in maybe on points now. Up 1 point coming in for that final spot in the playoffs, and a big spin! And now the 43's not going to get out of the second turn. Oh, and a disaster strikes for Woodpecker. I don't know what happened trying to come out of the first turn there, but that was a disaster from the start, and it's a DNF from the inside line for Woodpecker. Boy, that is not good at all. As you'll see, Bloodstorm now on the screen. Bloodstorm has had a quietly pretty solid season, averaging a 9th place finish. No finals appearances, but a pretty solid year. And on points right now is the 86. and trying to follow up a pretty bad lap with hopefully a better one than what we just saw. But they're going to spin. Come across the line backwards is what's going to happen, and that will settle into a 4.9. That's 7th out of the 12 to run. Could have been a lot worse for Bloodstorm after failing to get around that first turn without spinning totally around. So here is Mozilla now, who pulled off a big upset, advancing as the 18 seed last week. It still has not been a very good year, but Mozilla has dug their way out of the bottom of the standings. Still going to need a victory in order to make it into the playoffs, sneak in somehow. And this is not a great track for it to happen at. Mozilla has struggled here, failed to qualify in this race last season, and is going to get around the turn. That's a big victory there for the 66 to get around the turn. It's still the slowest time out of any of the drivers to finish the lap with a 5.72, but better than a DNF for sure, and I'm sure not exactly what Woodpecker would have liked to see. They would have loved to have seen a second driver fail to finish the lap, give them a much better chance if you go into that outside lap run. Now here's Murakami coming off of a season best finish and coming into a race in which they finished second in this race last season. They've got good numbers here. This is a big spot for the 4-car. And it's going to start out here with the inside line run from the 4. Murakami off and running. Here we go. And looks like a pretty solid time. Got a little loose on the back end there, but that's a good lap. And it's the second fastest lap of the day. And only the second lap to run under 4 seconds. That's a 3.96. And Murakami, who has had success here with a very successful first run there, as they'll give way on the track to Le Mondrizel, coming off a 6th place finish last week. Also coming off of a 6th place finish in this race last season. The numbers can't get any better than what Le Mondrizel has done at Spiral Speedway. It has been overly impressive. Couple of wins, 3 finals appearances, a ridiculous 35 heat wins here at this track. And Drizel trying to keep that going. Although this doesn't look like an overly impressive lap there from Le Mondrizel. It's going to be middle of the pack there. 7th fastest with a 4.38, settling in right behind Piper. A pretty big gap there from 7th to 8th. Nearly 0.6 of a second separate those two drivers, as you'll see the 33 of Earl now. Earl finished 12th in this race last season, has a win this year, and has had a really good season, including making it into the final 6 last week and winning their first career race, the week before. Earl trying to continue that momentum into the playoffs here, with just 2 races left, and this looks like a pretty solid lap there for the 33. Running it back, and it is going to be a 4.23. That is 6th fastest right now. And Woodpecker, who was the Red Pandas Racing driver who failed to finish the lap, is the only that is not right next to each other. Right now it goes Earl, Piper, and Le Mondrizel, occupying 6th, 7th, and 8th. As we go to Winks, 4th place finish, a career high for Winks last week, trying to keep that momentum and somehow sneak into the playoffs with a victory maybe. You never know. Numbers are not good really anywhere for Winks, who has really struggled. But you never know when that tide could change. Here comes the 13 out of the starting gate with a pretty solid lap. This looks good for Winks, and it is pretty solid. 6th right now, a 4.1. Just 1/100th of a second behind Nugget, and 2/100ths of a second behind Steve. Pretty solid as we get into the finalists from last week. This is Quillo for Marble Sports Worldwide. MSWP's on the hood once again, as always, for that number 9. And Quillo has good numbers by finish here at Spiral Speedway, but is not a great qualifier here. You can see 13.67 the average qualifying position, and only a 12th place average qualifying position for the season. So this has not been Quillo's strong suit. As they get ready to go in a big spin, they're going to come out of turn 1 backwards and get through with a 4.77. That is 10th fastest right now. Could have been a lot worse with how sideways that car got and backwards it came out of turn 1. And now here comes Oak. Who will try to build off of a second-place finish last week and a third-place finish at this race last season for the defending champion of this league. And a big trouble coming into turn 1, but the speed is there for the 48. Just kept on moving forward, and a pretty solid time, a 4.16. Good enough for 7th. Boy, with how wild that car was, just imagine if you could hone it in a little bit, how fast it could have been. Now here comes this defending winner, last week's victor, the 11 of Neptune, who is also, for what it's worth, the last car to win at this track. Did it to start the season. So Neptune trying to build momentum after a disappointing middle portion of the season following that season opening win. They win for the second time last week. Now the 11 gets ready to go with the qualifying here for the Spiral Speedway Malbao 400. It looks like a pretty solid time, and it is the best time of the day. Neptune to the top of the board. The 11 runs the fastest lap from the inside line, a 3:88. And that will do it for the inside line laps. As you look at Neptune, Jack Tato, Murakami, Streamer, Steve, and Nugget, those would be the top seeds, all the way down to Mozilla and Woodpecker. Right now, they're on the outs. Here comes Prime. Ran a 5:03 on the first lap, and again, just not a lot of speed here, limping almost down the line. That is a 5:17. The average time is a 5.10. And yeah, there's just not a whole lot there. Really not any mistakes being made by Prime. There's just no speed in that car. Here comes Nugget, who ran a pretty good lap. Was 6th best from the inside line, and that will be a 4.61, about a half a second slower from the outside. Average it to a 4:35, though, into the top of the board. For the moment, at least, goes the 99 of Nugget. So now here is Steve, and Steve may have had a little bit of trouble getting out, but looks like there's some speed in that car, and Steve keeps it moving, goes to the top of the board, a 3:86. Fastest time of the day from either lap belongs to that lap right there from Steve, who is with a sub-4 second average time, a 3.97. Now here comes Sal, who was at the bottom. Enough to be in the race from that inside line, but nothing great. And they will run a 4.79, average to a 4.96. That will lock Nugget into the race. But a much better lap there from the inside, or the outside line, rather, that time from Sal. So can't be too disappointed about that. Here comes the 93. Electro smacking right into the wall. I don't know what's going on with the 93, but they are having all sorts of trouble. A 5.27. It's a 5.12 average time. Electro moves to the bottom of the board. 5th out of the 5 to run so far. Sal is in the race officially now. And now, look like Piper may have had a little bit of trouble getting out of the starting gates here. The 53 gets it going and puts it forward with a 4.33. Very close to that first time. It's a 4.34 average time, and just enough to pull just in front of Nugget there for second place right now. Now here comes Confetti, who ran a 5.10. And looks like that was a better lap that time. It is a 4.55. We'll move Confetti up to 4th place. It keeps Prime and Electro as the two drivers on the outs right now. And here comes Spitzer. Spitzer needs a good lap. Ran the 3rd slowest lap, and this is even slower, I think. A 5.34. That time it was a 5.58. It's the slowest lap combined. It will lock Prime into the race and continues struggles for the bubble drivers right now. And Confetti, getting pretty excited about that, came in 16 points below the cut line. As Jack Tato, who ran the 2nd fastest lap is going to run a little slower there, a 4.16. They'll drop below Steve and are second on the board right now. So Steve trying to win yet another pole and in position to do that currently, but still a couple of drivers that could challenge for that. Here's Streamer, who could potentially do the same, as Streamer looks like a pretty good lap. Comparatively got a little wild there at the end, and Streamer will average out to a 4.10, good enough for third right now. And there are the top 10, rather the first 10 I should say, as it's Electro and Spitzer right now that are the two on the outs. As Prime is the last car in right now. Steve, who of course used to drive for Maobao, maybe in potentially position there to win the pole for the Maobao 400. Here's Woodpecker, needs a good lap. This is not a great lap, and it's getting worse as we get to the bottom there. Oh my goodness, that was a 5:32. It's going to average out their time to just a 6:06, and that was certainly not what Woodpecker wanted. Going to need a big problem from a couple of cars here to try to get in the race, as Electro is locked in. Now here comes Bloodstorm. Bloodstorm hard into the wall there out of turn 2, and that will average out their time to a 4:49. Still a pretty solid lap there. And good enough for 6th for Bloodstorm. Here is Mozilla, who has the slowest time out of those still to run, and trying to pick up momentum down the backstretch. Is it enough? I don't think it is. It is, actually. Wow. A 4:92, enough to pass Spitzer. And Mozilla is locked in, and now Spitzer is in some trouble. Trying to take advantage of the fact that Woodpecker is almost certainly not going to make this race, and they might not make it as Murakami gets going. Trying to get to the top of the board, not going to happen. A 4:18 will average to a 4:07. That's good enough for third right now. And Steve has one real competitor here for the pole, and that is the car that ran the fastest time, which is Neptune. Here's Lemon Drizel, who looks like this is a better outside lap than it was from the inside. A little bit better, yeah, and it'll average to a 4:26. Good enough for fifth right now. Passing Piper is Lemon Drizel, who will now be followed up by the teammate Earl, who ran a 4:23. And Earl looks like this is a really fast lap. Very nice from Earl. That's a 3:98. And up to fifth place goes Earl with a 4:11 average time, just behind Streamer. Earl pretty solidifying there, that spot. Pretty nice run. Here is Winks, who ran a 4:10, trying to keep the momentum of last week going. Looks like another pretty solid lap here, not the fastest one you'll see. It's a 4:32, good enough for sixth place when you average the times out for the 13 of Winks. Really impressive so far from Winks here today after a great race last week. Trying to keep it going again. Here is Quillo now, who ran a 4:77. That is certainly good enough to get in, even if you don't improve on it, but Quillo says, I'll go ahead and improve on it. A 4:50 as the average time. That's good enough for 11th. And two racers are left. Here is Oak, who ran a 4:16. And is going to finish this lap off. That was a 4:45, 8th place when you average it out for Oak. That will eliminate Woodpecker, who will officially not make this race, and almost certainly, unless some kind of insane disaster happens here, Neptune is going to get in, and it will be Woodpecker, or excuse me, Spitzer not making it in. It is Neptune. However, the time is not fast enough to beat out Steve. A 4:10 averages to a 3:99, and Steve runs the fastest time and just set a single season record with 3 poles. Third of the season for Steve, back-to-back poles, joining Woodpecker from last season as just the second driver in NASMARB history to do that, as Steve puts up another big day of speed. Let's see if he can translate that into the race tomorrow. Failing to qualify, Spitzer and Woodpecker. My goodness, what a disaster for those two drivers. Woodpecker was 1 point above the cut line. Spitzer was 1 point below. Now, it's anybody's race. Confetti really going to look to try to take advantage of that as they make it into the race. They're the next car in. Bonus point for Neptune and for Steve for the fastest inside and outside lines. Give 3 more bonus points to Steve for the pole position with an average time of 3.97. As you look at the groups here, Steve, Oak, and Mozilla will be in Group 1, followed up by Neptune, Piper, and Electro. Then Jack Tato, Lemon Drizel, and Prime, Murakami, Nugget, and Sal. Keep an eye on Group 5. That's where Confetti is, trying to make up some ground in the playoff race, as they will face Streamer and Bloodstorm in that group stage, followed by Group 6 of Earl, Winks, and Quillo. Things are just getting even more interesting than they may have been before, as the 2 drivers battling for that final spot both fail to make the race. The door is open. Let's see who comes in as we make our way to race number 7 of Season 2 of NASMARB. We hope that you join us tomorrow, but until then, I'm Rick O'Shea, and you've been watching a presentation of MSPN.